George Newhouse, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to me as part of One Degree with Lisa B on this beautiful day in Sydney.
Glorious, Lisa.
I'm so privileged to have you here, one of Australia's leading human rights lawyers, who is a friend, and I have watched and had a bit of an inner idea of what you're up to, and I thought it'd be lovely to have you to tell everyone some of the gems that you have. Such a a stellar career and such an amazing human. So thank you very much.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about the kinds of things you did as a child, because you read studies and there's newspaper articles and media articles that say what you're into as a child is often indicative of your life's purpose almost. So did you do things that indicated that you would go on to work in the field of human rights?
That's a really
Did you stand up for people in the playground, George?
That's a really interesting question. I think I did see injustice at my school. I went to a very old-fashioned school where people got caned. And in fact, I got caned on one or two occasions, quite unjustly. And
that's debatable.
But I did see injustice, and I think you're right. I think when I look back, that was the beginning of my sense of outrage when I saw wrongdoing and the abuse of power. Because we were, as young children in those days, were really pawns in the hands of our teachers. I mean, I remember our detentions were quite cruel. We had to sit on a bare, like a church pew, with our hands behind our back and not move for an hour. The teacher would actually sneak off in front of us and then end up behind us, and if you moved, he'd punch you in the head.
Can you imagine that happening today?
No.
Oh gosh, no.
No, so I actually think that's a really interesting point, Lisa. I've never thought through some of my motivations as a child or things I'd seen as a child and how they might have played out in later life. But my parents paid very good money for me to see young people assaulted and abused, and I think that I, in many ways, must have resented that, and it comes out today when I see injustice or cruelty against others. I want to stand up for the vulnerable person.
Yeah, so, going through your school years, you get to sort of years 11 and 12 and people ask you what you want to be when you grow up, and you and I know, no one knows what they want to be when they grow up really, because we're still growing up.
Yes.
But you didn't go into law straight away, did you?
No, I went into law because it was a good generalist degree. You could pretty much do anything with it. You could go into politics, or you could go into law, or you could go into commerce. So, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, I think law was a safe house.
And so when did you start to really hone in on human rights as something that you were particularly passionate about?
Well, look, I moved from banking and finance to law because ultimately I preferred dealing with people.
How do you feel when a case is resolved? And that's such a cold word to use, but when someone is found, or human rights, the justice is served. What does that feel like for you?
It's so satisfying. But what's more satisfying is seeing a resolution in the client's face or in their family's face, to actually have justice or be acknowledged or have their pain acknowledged. It's seeing them coming through and finding some peace that gives me the most joy and comfort. I mean, the cases we deal with are extremely traumatic, and sometimes it dawns on me just how painful and how much pain we are dealing with in our office. And actually we have a psychologist come fairly regularly and debrief the team, because we're dealing with so much trauma. But what gives us the strength to go through it is that we are helping extremely vulnerable and in many ways damaged people get through their pain, deal with the system which is unknown to them. So and finally to get them some kind of resolution. That's what powers us, and that's what enables us to deal with the pain, because we see some resolution at the end.
Just back to your point about having a psychologist come in and help the team, I guess, process what's happened. For you personally, outside of that, What do you do to, you know, at the end of every day, put your head on the pillow and sleep when that's going on? Or do you not sleep? What are your coping mechanisms for times of extreme stress and emotional, I guess, heightened emotional stress?
It's a really difficult question. I must be able to compartmentalise what's going on in my life and what's going on with my clients. My clients need to know that I'm strong. They don't want to see me break down. They want to know that their lawyer is actually helping them through it all and can see a pathway through it. If I was to break down, and I have from time to time, but rarely, it's not what they need or want. That doesn't mean I'm cold or unsympathetic. I'm extremely sympathetic, but I must be able to compartmentalise the pain. I think that what gets me through it is my own family and getting out and talking to friends and separating myself at the end of the day from the work. Although I work weekends, I work late in the evening because I love my work so much, and I love helping people.
When we first met, it was at the time when there were asylum seekers in boats off the coast of Western Australia, just in horrendous conditions, and I had, I guess, the privilege of seeing that from the inside out. And I'll never forget this one particular day where you were fielding calls from national media, trying to manage all of that, the circus, on top of the job at hand. You look back on times like that, and do you ever think, how the hell did I manage to keep all the balls in the air?
When you're in the midst of a national story, the media can be like vultures. And when you're running on the smell of an oily rag and you don't have comms people, or a group like yourself.
I was there. I'll field this one, George.
Even so, when you don't have that on a permanent basis, which
Yeah.
I don't, I was fortunate on that day, but it's incredibly stressful and incredibly demanding, and you come home at the end of the day and your head is spinning.
Can you describe for us a typical day? Because to be quite honest, most people think of Mark Darcy out of Bridget Jones' Diary when they think of a human rights lawyer, and he's running around with reindeer jumpers and having, you know, a food at mum's house. So what does a typical day look like for you? Bearing in mind there probably isn't a typical day.
One of the beauties of my job is every day is different. I'm not doing the same thing every day, you know. One day I'll get a case at 3 p.m. in the afternoon where I get a phone call from someone I've been dealing with on Nauru as an interpreter who suddenly calls me from Port Moresby in New Guinea and saying, "George, help me. I've been taken to Port Moresby by the government. They want me to undertake a medical procedure here. I don't want to do it. Can you help me?" So I'm on the phone to lawyers and barristers well into the night preparing for a court case the next morning in the High Court. I mean, that's how you may have to roll, where you've got an urgent case, you want to seek an injunction for that client. You're on the phone to New Guinea, you're on the phone to barristers all night, you're typing up court pleadings and affidavits with a team into, you know, until midnight, and then at 10 o'clock the next morning you're in the High Court and you get the injunction. That's rare, but that's one of the most exciting days you can have.
Your adrenaline must be off the scale when that's happening.
It is, and then when it's over, you're smashed.
Yeah.
And you've got to start work again. But, you know, that can be one day, and then the next day you might be getting phone calls from Aboriginal community members in country New South Wales who've been injured or harmed in the health system, and they ring up and they say, "Look, we think we've suffered racial discrimination at such and such hospital. They didn't care for us," you know, and you'll be taking a new client and onboarding them.
Tell me about the National Justice Project, because throughout your career you've worked for law firms and you've done your own thing, and but this is something that you've started relatively recently.
I felt that there was a need, particularly in New South Wales, there was a gap in the provision of social justice advocacy and law in New South Wales. Although we do work nationally, we do a lot of work in Queensland and Western Australia, I felt that there were a lot of people who wanted to give in this area, a lot of lawyers who wanted to give in this area, and they couldn't find an outlet in Sydney. So I I thought it was a natural extension of the work I've been doing. I have a lot of clients who ring me regularly and they need help, and I bring them together and match them with lawyers who want to give back to the community.
What does success look like for you?
Success for me means I don't have a job. How can that be? My work relies on injustice and cruelty and suffering. So when there's none of that in our world, I won't have a job and I'll be very happy.
What are you most grateful for?
Oh, I'm thankful for my family, my childhood. I mentioned the canings at school, but ultimately I had a very loving and dedicated family. I love my children and the area I live in. I'm very thankful to live in Australia. I'm thankful for all the things I have, but I love my work too. I really love helping other people. I love waking up in the morning and not knowing what kind of court case we might be involved in the next day.
I want to ask you about daily rituals. So if you follow the George Newhouse Instagram in particular,
Yes.
there's a theme. And we did actually want to film today down at Bondi Beach, but we're in somewhere else, which is equally beautiful for legal reasons. But what do you do every day? What are your must-dos to keep you sane and on track? Because they're the things that others look to people like you to copy, I guess.
Yeah. It's made me think about your earlier question, which is how I cope with the trauma in my life. And I think one of the ways I do it is my early morning routine. I go out and I look at a horizon. I head out to Bondi Beach very early, or I sometimes do yoga or Pilates, but I often get out in the outdoors and I see the beauty of a sunrise at Bondi, and it is beautiful. And it gives me joy and it revitalises me every day. And I don't know that I do it for therapeutic reasons, but at some level it must give me the strength and joy to get through the day. The new dawn can be inspiring. I think it's really important to wind down, and I do tend to sleep easy. I mean, I don't know why, but at the end of the day, yeah. It's like,
Whacks you on the head.
maybe that's
He's
what
out.
it is. Maybe that's why I do
It's
it.
enough of George for today.
Exactly.
What's next for you?
Wow, what's next? Well, I'm living the dream. I mean, I'm happy to grow the National Justice Project. Hopefully one day, as I say, the work may dry up, but until that day I'm going to keep doing what I do and mentoring younger people to come up through the ranks and do this job. We have an alma mater, a graduate group that's gone on to do wonderful things, and it gives me so much joy. They're like my own children when I see them heading up organisations around Australia and giving me a call saying, hey, we've got this case, what can we do in this situation, or would you like to help us? That's what gives me so much joy, and I don't plan on retiring for the time being. I'm going to keep working and keep growing the next generation of social justice warriors.
I can't imagine you retiring, and actually I think that's a term that's going to become obsolete eventually.
Right.
But George, thank you so much. It's been such an honour and a pleasure, and I hope everyone watching realises how valuable it is to be able to get behind all the I guess, media and things that you do to understand the person behind it and what drives you. So thank you so much, George.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.